Let's say we're in a class, and just for the story's sake, let's assume that most of you are asleep. Some lecture or discussion is going on, and instead of dozing off, I'm attentive. I raise my hand to ask a question, and the teacher calls on me, but it's Aryaman, Arman, Akash, Aaryan, anything that's not my name. This is well into the second semester of the school year, yet a teacher is still butchering my name. It happens to lots of people with foreign names, and when it happens to me, I tend to respond negatively. Instead of correcting people and moving on, I stay silent, feel ashamed. I rerun scenes, contemplating what I should have done or said, but most of the time, I beat myself up for not being more. I wonder whether I could have contributed more or been more impactful, enough so that at the very least, a teacher could remember my name, like they do for everyone else. These slight instances can linger in my head for ages. And these slights aren't limited to misnaming. I can name 1,000 examples. You could get cut off when speaking. You could feel condescended by someone's words. You could embarrass yourself. And perhaps when you respond, instead of staying silent like myself, you respond way too aggressively by yelling at them. Whatever it is or whatever the response, we're constantly running into slights and struggling to deal with them. And as it's turning out, this isn't just happening at school or work. Let's say you're scrolling through Twitter or TikTok when you see something provocative, something that antagonizes you, prodding you to comment under or share. And in the moment, you do so without thought. You do so without thought because it seizes you. But when you look closer, the person behind the screen is probably trying to make you mad. An online sadist who thrives off emotional rather than physical pain. Most of us know these people as trolls. Trolls have expanded and evolved, from repeatedly posting online inside jokes on online messaging boards in the 90s, to Rick rolling us when we're trying to catch free movies on YouTube, and to now attempting ratios and sowing political chaos. Let me give you an example. You might have seen this before from Peanuts, commonly known as the football gag. Lucy would have a ball and ask Charlie to kick it, but Charlie would initially refuse, knowing from past experience that Lucy would remove the ball at the last second. However, Lucy would antagonize Charlie, enough so that Charlie would agree to kick the ball. And sure enough, every single time, Lucy would remove the ball, sending Charlie to the ground. And that's a perfect representation of a troll. A troll wants to see you baited, lying flat on your butt, embarrassed, and confused, because to them, it's amusing. Lucy wanted to see the sheepish yet angry face Charlie would give once he got up from the ground. Had Charlie recognized why Lucy was so invested in him kicking the ball, he would have been able to understand that it isn't necessary for him to fall for her bait and save himself from the embarrassment. Trolls are surprisingly a similar phenomenon to teachers misnaming me. And before I fail out of all my classes, I don't mean in the intention they have, but the effect they have on me. My teachers likely didn't mean to hurt me, while Lucy meant to hurt Charlie, but they both had a similar effect on myself and Charlie. We both felt embarrassed and unnerved. And most of the time, it can be difficult distinguishing between the two, intentional and unintentional slights. If your friends don't invite you to go out, you can never truthfully know the intentionality behind it. That's out of your control. But what is in your control is how you react. Instead of responding in a way that puts ourselves down, we can react in a way that is positive and isn't just getting over it. But it's easier said than done. Everyone would love to be optimistic and energized every minute of the day, but it's not so easily attainable. However, I think this way might work. You have to understand that whenever we encounter a slight, we assign the slight and the emotions we feel from it to a narrative. In order to move on from the slight, we have to understand what the narrative is. So the first step is recognize. So when a teacher misnames me, I have to recognize the narrative I'm building isn't that I'm upset because my name is hard to pronounce. Rather, I'm upset because it makes me feel I'm just another student in the abyss, and I'm not even worthy of people remembering so much as my name. But does the slight really prove the narrative true, or are we just spinning at thin air? Emphasize. Is it so much that the slight exactly fits the narrative, or is it that as a human, your natural inclination is to be negative and believe and delude yourself into thinking that this slight is a concrete example that the negative narrative is in place? For instance, when a teacher misnames me, my initial disposition would be to say I'm upset because I'm unimportant. But that's a huge leap to make. There are a lot of other variables at play. Like, my teacher has probably had hundreds of students prior to me, and my friends and family don't misname me, so am I really so unimportant? We have to take a step back and consider all the factors. Finally, revise. The negative narrative that you initially created is in all probability not fitting the slight. So what is the true narrative? In other words, why did the slight occur? A teacher misnamed me, not because I'm unimportant, but more likely because they've had a lot of students in their past. We tend to pick the most negative narrative, but instead we should take a step back, consider the situation critically, and stop berating ourselves. Allow me to demonstrate on a previous example. Your friends don't invite you to go out. Recognize, why does this hurt you? Most likely, you think that your friends might not really be your friends. Emphasize, is this true? Do they try to distance themselves from you? Do they talk to you elsewhere? And finally, revise. What is probably at play here? Maybe you haven't been going out recently, and they thought you wouldn't want to go. It's easy, and it's hard to speculate what is really going on. But by recognizing, emphasizing, and revising, we can really figure out what's going on here and stop berating ourselves. We can't control everything in life, but what we can control is how we react to the negative occurrences. And occasionally, we will run into slights that actually prove a negative narrative true. But by recognizing, emphasizing, and revising, we can separate some of the significant slights from the insignificant slights and spend our time more meaningfully. So next time a teacher misnames me, I won't allow myself to descend into a state of total insecurity. But if the day comes when my parents forget my name, maybe then I'll reconsider my importance in this world. Until then, I should be fine. Thank you.